Welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and there is not a police standoff at the end of my block on this Friday night.
Oh, are we gonna expect sirens now?
So I forgot to tell you this on my last episode, so I figured I'd open the bit this episode with
Sure.
it. Do you remember how last week you and I, because we have to coordinate these things over several time zones, had our little mix-up and we were gonna record on Friday and then we ended up recording on Saturday instead?
Yes.
Well, very shortly after we decided that we weren't going to be recording, there was like a police standoff that started like down at the end of my block, where they like surrounded a guy in a store who had like taken refuge in a store, and it went on for multiple hours. There were helicopters flying above me broadcasting "come out with your hands up." Apparently this is a thing that actually does happen. It was crazy, but also it would have been terrible to record during.
Oh, well, I guess that kind of works out then.
Yeah. So that's a little taste of what living in Los Angeles is like.
Love that.
It's the return. It's the glorious return, Bradley, of the sirens from 2 apartments ago when we first started recording this podcast, and I was in the middle of downtown LA.
That's right. It was always a cop car. We had to be like, stop, wait.
God
There's a
damn
cop
it.
coming.
God damn
We have
it.
to keep going.
All right. Nope. There comes a helicopter.
Yep.
There comes a fucking helicopter. So, before we get started on today's exciting episode of Charles and Bradley analyze the fuck out of this show, because this is what we're doing with our lives apparently, I have to issue not so much correction as an addendum to something I said on the last 3 episodes ago, actually, the first episode of Ahsoka.
Oh, okay.
That I said, that it was pointed out to me. So I'm going to give this about 75% the thing Charles fucked up, because I should have known this. But also 25% not, because when you Google, the first thing that came up was what I said, because I was double checking. But I'm here now. We're going to give credit where it's due. So it was pointed out to me by a listener that I left some titles off of Jennifer Corbett. Do you remember back in episode 1, we said that woman on the Vesper is probably named after Jennifer Corbett, and she's the head writer of The Bad Batch?
Right.
Well, I did leave off a couple of titles, so I want to give credit where credit is due. She is also a producer on the show. She is the showrunner of the show, and she is the co-creator of the show.
That's a few credits you
That's a
probably
few credits
should have
that were
included.
missed.
They're just a little important.
We're working on making sure that sources are adequately updated with those for the future.
Sure.
But that was at least 75% the thing Charles fucked up. I should have at least remembered she was the showrunner. I couldn't remember if she had the showrunner title or not. But she does. She's the showrunner of the show. So my apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. Credit where it's due. She is, I believe, the first female showrunner of a Star Wars show.
Other than Kenobi?
She predates Kenobi.
Oh yeah, because I guess that came before.
Yeah, she predates the Kenobi.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah, Bad Batch came out
Okay.
first. So she's the first. We want to give credit where credit is due.
Okay.
That was my sort of correction from episode 1. And now we can move on into something else, unless we have some news to talk about, Bradley. Is there anything happening in the news?
I mean, by the time we say anything, we're gonna have to.
It's
You're
true,
gonna have to
it'll be
make
out
a
of
correction and put a little
That's
audio
true.
before this episode. So
I swear Bradley's getting sick of having to add the tags that I'm getting sick of having to record. Because I love having 9 to 10 days
sure.
to sit here, make sure that the show is good, QA it. I'm so fucking busy in my life. That gives me time to listen to the show, address anything that needs to be addressed. But I keep having to record these fucking stingers.
Right.
Because it turns out that we're in a major Star Wars, and everybody's a buzz because we're like 5 minutes away, everybody thinks, from getting a Bad Batch Season 3 trailer.
Why would you say that? Because now you're gonna have to record. Watch this.
Now I'm
it's
going to have to get
come
on the
out,
stinger. There's almost
because
certainly
this
gonna be a
episode's not
stinger.
gonna come out for like another week and a half. So it's like you just jinxed yourself, because now she's gonna drop the trailer and then you're gonna have to add it in the very beginning of this episode. Everybody's gonna go, oh, that's why they put that in the front.
Hi there, it's Charles with Future Knowledge. In the intervening time between recording this episode.
Actually, I kind of hope that that happens only because one, we'll get the fucking trailer, and
We'll get the
then
trailer.
two, because it's funny. I just love comedy.
Star Wars. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing this. We will talk about the fucking Bad Batch trailer, including the ending of it, in next week's episode. Fucking hell. I'm sorry, but nothing is going to top you doing a tarot card reading of like,
Should
there's
I do
going
one
to
now?
be change.
I'll tell you.
We're not doing another one. There's going to be change.
Right.
There's going to be some
A surprise is
moment
in
of
store for
change.
you tomorrow.
Boom! Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Boom! Ahsoka season 2. Announced in the middle of a fucking the Mandalorian and Grogu article, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? No, nothing noteworthy happened shortly before the recording of this episode, except some bullshit on Twitter. But if we reported every bit of bullshit on Twitter, this would be a completely different show. Check your sources, guys. Check your sources. If you're reading an article, click on where they got the source from,
Right.
and check that thing's source. I'm just saying that's how we avoid a lot of grief. All right, well, Bradley, you want to take us into what are we talking about today? Why are we here? Existentially, why are we here?
Well, I guess technically we're here because we're about to perform a funeral.
We are indeed about to perform a funeral, which is
In
very
somber
tragic.
Reflection, we gather here today to remember Merrick, an inquisitor ensnared in sinister machinations of Night Sister's dark magic. His journey from the halls of the Inquisition to the puppetry of resurrection paints a complex tapestry within the Star Wars galaxy. May the Force grant him solace in the afterlife.
Amen.
Sorry, I had to. It was too funny.
He wrote the whole thing out, by the way. He sent it to me like yesterday and was like, by the way, I'm going to read this.
How
So
fucking
be
funny.
prepared. Be prepared.
I can't.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
It's the Marak Dies episode.
Which I knew this was coming, and I'm still not even prepared for it. So here we go. Yes, this week we are talking about Ahsoka Episode 4, Part 4, The Fallen Jedi, where Hera risks her career to help her friends, while Ahsoka and Sabine confront enemies. Charles, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
One thing I really liked was the Ahsoka and Sabine stuff. I thought this was an episode that really improved on last week's maneuvering everything into place. We got some solid moments between Ahsoka and Sabine. We got some solid moments of character choice for both of these characters. Both actresses got to have just incredible emotional journeys throughout the entire span of this episode. And also just shout out to the late, great Ray Stevenson for his fucking performance in this episode. My God, this man was incredible. Dear Lord. But I did really like all the Ahsoka Sabine stuff. One thing I did not particularly like, I felt like Hera was kind of here. Like, she's in this episode to set up that she's going to be in the next episode. And her two scenes, while fun, and we'll get to them in a second, they're just kind of here so that she can be here. And I think this is part of the downside of the serialized storytelling that this is going for. Do you have to focus on different characters and different beats? You know, you can't always be going all the time. It makes characters who aren't getting a particular emotional beat feel just like they're sort of there. Especially if you have people turning in performances, and not that the performances in any of the Hera section actors are bad, but it's overshadowed, I think, by the writing for Ahsoka and Sabine and what's being turned in just generally as far as the direction, as far as the action, as far as all of that in the Ahsoka stuff. So yeah, that was my only little sort of nitpick, was I would have liked a little more oomph from the Hera stuff. I think the fact that because she's just kind of like, yeah, I'm going rogue. Try and stop me. Which is great. I love Hera. But I think it just needs just a little bit more punch, especially since this is like the mid-season finale. It's supposed to be sort of like a big point on this particular crescendo. I don't know, Bradley, what about you? One thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
One thing I liked about this episode was Ray Stevenson as Balin. Balin finally had something to do. It's what I felt like. And so I liked that he like finally we were starting to get into, okay, what is this character's motives? What does he want? What is he trying to achieve? Clearly there's something going on and he's like trying to get something. It's just like they finally starting to like give his character something. Like we got a little tease of him in the very first episode, and then it was kind of like he was just there until now. And so I liked that they finally started giving him something to do. One I did not like about this episode was killing a character that has no point or purpose and then not explaining what happened to said character when they died, and just forgetting about their character completely for the rest of the show after this. That's what I did not like.
I sense you have some strong feelings about this Inquisitor. You did not want to see the text messages that were exchanged back and forth between Bradley and I after this episode about Maruk, because we were both like, what the fuck was the
Yeah, it
point
was very
of
much
that?
a what the fuck was that? Like, I don't understand. And I'm sure the internet was wild as well. Like,
Not
I
as much
always
as you'd think. You have to remember, and this is important contextual piece of information for Ahsoka. You have to remember that Ahsoka was coming out during most particularly the SAG after strike. The WAGA didn't care what people said on the internet, but you remember at the time, the whole reason we did books and comics was because SAG was like, hey, don't give any work any unpaid promotion.
right.
So some people, myself included, opted to just go ahead and not talk about Ahsoka at all online. So it was a personal choice that I made. And a lot of the discussion around Ahsoka at the time was hampered from, I think, what would have been, particularly at the end of this episode and into the next episode. I do wish that we would have had that opportunity collectively as a community to discuss some of these things.
Right.
Because I also feel like that would have helped me enjoy the back half of the show a lot more. Because I'm enjoying the front half of the show a lot more on my rewatch.
Right. Because we can finally just discuss it and really like go into it. Whereas before we really couldn't. Or I mean, like we did a little bit, but we were like, well, let's save it for the show. Let's try not to get too into it.
We're not going to have a giant discussion like we do about Percy Jackson weekly.
Yeah, it just felt like we couldn't really go into it. And I guess if a lot of people felt the same way, then there was no discourse. There was no discussion or like, oh, explanation or like, oh, well, this is probably the answer, or this is probably what it is, or this is probably, or this is my headcanon, this is my theory,
I think that's what the show wanted people to do, but because of the environment it was coming out in, you couldn't really do that in public. I had plenty of conversations about the show. I'm in a number of Discords and, I talk to people.
Sure.
I interact with people in real life. People in real life know me as the Star Wars guy. So I'll go to a party and people will come up to me and be like, hey, did you see the new episode of Ahsoka? Yeah, obviously I saw the new episode of Ahsoka. I saw it at 6 o'clock p.m. when it dropped.
I watch it
because
right
I cleared my
out.
fucking schedule. Actually, sometimes I would watch it at 8 because I would have a social engagement before that, who were kind enough to release me during Ahsoka early in order to go over and watch it. Neither of the people involved in that are listening to the show, but shout out for y'all for letting me escape early to watch Ahsoka. Speaking of Ahsoka, Bradley, you want to take us into this episode?
Section 1, we begin in the force of Cetos and on Ahsoka's ship where Huyang is making repairs and Sabine attempts to contact Hera and Home One unsuccessfully. Sabine meets with Ahsoka outside, who warns Sabine that if they can't make the journey to find Ezra, no one should, to prevent Thrawn's return. Meanwhile, the enemy is informed of the hero's whereabouts, so Morgan sends her guards and Balin sends Shin and Merrick to assist in slowing them down. Title card, Part 4, Fallen Jedi.
You're so good at writing. You're so good at writing words.
Sometimes when my autocorrect does things, I forget that I don't go back and check it. And so like, it'll say things like, because it doesn't know Star Wars words. And so it'll correct things like Huyang is not Huyang on my notes. And so it messes me up and it fucks me up every single time when I try to read it. Cause I'm like, God damn it, that's not what I said.
I am so glad to know that all of the money we spent on college courses prepared you to adequately summarize Star Wars episodes.
Absolutely.
That's what our degree was for.
Money was for.
I don't know. We don't have time. We don't have time to get into that.
True.
We don't have time to
save it for the non-existent Patreon.
Yeah. Eventually, one day, we'll do Patreon
Or we
live
can talk shit
chats.
about whatever we want.
Or we can talk shit about our alma mater. It's going to be me talking shit about our alma mater. Because I've done that so much, they've had to email me and ask me to stop. Speaking of me not stopping, my literal first note is that the forest shot, like just the shot that opens the episode of the like ship and it's framed in the trees and the leaves are falling, it's fucking gorgeous.
I love it's the aesthetic of I'm assuming the aesthetic is supposed to be like a Japanese forest. Like it's supposed to be this like very samurai creepy kind of like ominous kind of like vibe.
I think that's what they're going for, like one of those forests in like fall.
Yeah, definitely a fall vibe for
Like
sure.
it's a fall vibe. It's like an
Mhm.
autumn vibe. And like I
It gave me
dig it.
like the Ronin, but like if it was in color, like that's what it would look like.
Yes.
That's what it was supposed to be.
Yes. But Bradley, there's no Japanese influences in Star Wars
No, that's right.
whatsoever,
I forgot.
according to
Sorry.
the internet.
I
You
forgot.
can't have Star Wars anime because there's no influence of
Whatsoever.
Japanese media at all in Star Wars. Unrelatedly, I'm thinking about watching an Akira Kurosawa movie this weekend. This is just totally unrelated to what I just said. We get our sort of central conflict with Ahsoka and Sabine right here up top, which is good writing because they're setting up the conflict now that's going to pay off at the end of the episode.
Finally.
Finally, some good fucking structure.
I was gonna say this is hardly the first time I noticed the actual structure and it actually was successful. I was like, oh, okay. We're finally into traditional like TV storytelling. Like we're getting back in the groove.
Here's a setup. The
Right.
episode's going to be about
This.
Sabine and Ahsoka not being on the same wavelength. And at the end of the episode, there's going to be a major turning point in them not being on the same wavelength. Thank fucking God. The show not... I don't want to sit here and be like, the writing on the show is bad, because the writing on the show is actually quite good. And the structure is not like just Lincoln logs all over the place. Like, there's intentionality to it. I just have issues with it. But this is a great example of something that works really well in this specific episode, is that there is a clear through line throughout the entire episode. We also get the Heir to the Empire title drop.
I know everybody was freaking out at least about that line because that was from the trailer, right?
It was from the trailer.
Right.
My recollection is people are all kind of like, that's weirdly specific, because this was pre, I think, Heir to the Empire movie being announced.
Yeah, it's definitely on the nose.
Heir to the Empire being announced, or like right after it had been announced.
It must have been during because I feel like it was I'm sure like when the trailer dropped, it was like a very much, oh, this is just a reference. Like, and everybody was like, that was the book that Thrawn is in. So it makes sense. Ha ha ha. And then now looking back, I feel like this episode probably came out similarly around the time that was announced. So who knows?
We can actually check. Star Wars Celebration Europe took place April 7th through 10th, 2023. So it was a while before this.
Oh, okay.
We knew the Heir to the Empire movie was coming, but we first saw it in the trailer.
Right.
And people are like, oh, okay, but here we go. You can say the fucking thing, Bradley. Say the thing. Just get it out of your system.
Luke. I'm just kidding.
God damn it. I thought you were going to go with a roll credits joke.
Oh, you know what's funny is I was thinking about that, but I thought it would be funnier. Like, well, obviously this means Luke is going to show up. I mean,
well, clearly he already has. Obviously, that was Luke.
That was
Luke.
Boba Fett. Yes, right. Oh yeah, that's right. That's the fan theory.
Clearly, that's who that
right,
was.
That's my theory. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, roll credits. She said the thing. We're done, right? Well, she didn't say.
Yeah, we don't have to
technically
do any of the rest of the Mandoverse.
But it doesn't count in this because this is not the movie's not called, or the thing we're watching is not called Heir to the Empire. So therefore, she said it too early. She said it before her movie actually started, and therefore that movie can never come out now.
Ahsoka, you're too early on your line. That's your line later. It's later.
Now they'll never say it in the movie. She already said it here.
Exactly. Maybe we'll get. Maybe somebody will say. Maybe it'll turn out to be a trilogy after all, and somebody will say the words "Dark Force Rising" in the second season of Ahsoka.
I mean, I'm assuming Thrawn's gonna bend down. He's gonna pick up this thing. He's gonna go, "Oh yes, this is the glove of Darth Vader. I am the heir to the Empire now." Um,
God damn
how
it.
many other titles can we squeeze in there?
Uh, didn't you just find an omnibus of the first four?
It's the first
Well,
three.
first three.
Yes. And it says book one, so I'm like, wait, is there more?
Yeah, there's six. There's
Oh
six total.
shit.
There was supposed to be nine, but it got canceled. So there was only six.
But see, I'm like a completist, so like I've got to have to like go to all these weird used bookstores now and try to find
Yeah, you're gonna
like
have to find volume two of this. See,
great.
I was saying, and let me know, listeners, if you have any interest in this whatsoever. But I was saying, just as a bit, some point when we have nothing else to do, like maybe when we finish Visions, if we have a month to kill, we should totally do the Club of Darth Vader series.
You
That
know,
would be
I'm sure people would
fucking
love me reading an
hilarious.
actual Legends book for once.
It's one day I will get you to read a Legends book. Eventually. We gotta get you through
Eventually.
canon. We gotta get you through canon, the High Republic, and
Right.
then all of Percy Jackson as well first.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Actually, you know what's funny is I work with this girl. She's the accountant on our show. So shout out to you, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany.
She
She's
just
not listening
started
to this episode,
she
probably.
just started watching Star Wars. Like she just started getting into it.
Congratulations.
And she's watching in timeline order.
Cool.
So
Perfectly
she
respectable way to do it.
and she's already finished Clone Wars and all that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's only been like a month. And so she's like
Wow.
really into it. And I was like, I was chatting with her about it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I just started reading the books like a year ago or whatever." And she goes, "Books?" And I was like, "Yeah, like some of them are really good, like little, if you want just like a little bit extra story, like to go with it." And she's like, "Oh, well," because she asked me before, she's like, she didn't know what all this stuff to watch was, and I was like, "I'll find you like a timeline order of stuff to watch, and I'll send it to you." So I found it and I sent it to her, like visual media. And then she was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." And then when we were talking about the books, I was like, "Oh, well, let me find you a timeline chronological of the books list somewhere." And I gave her a vague one and I took out some of the young adult ones that
Right.
weren't really important. And I was like, well, here's like the
Or
major ones that
good.
I know of are decent and that are like worth reading. Yeah, it was a huge ass list. And I was like, I haven't even read half of these because half of them are like all of the New Republic stuff. So it's like
High Republic,
or
yeah.
high, or no, well, not even the High Republic stuff. It's just also the sequel series. Like I haven't even
Right.
read like half of those. So like Alphabet Squadron and Aftermath and all that stuff. So I was like, girl, good luck. I was like, here's the list. If you want to read them all, go for it. I was like, I'm not gonna do that. But
Pro tip
I
to
thought it was funny.
people, and this is something I actually do. Wikipedia, shout out Wikipedia, hey, has a timeline of canon media and timeline of legends media pages that will show you everything in what they have determined to be chronological order, and you can actually filter it out on that page. So if you're just interested in seeing like what are all of the books in chronological order, you can go and you can filter that out, and it differentiates between young adult and adult novels, and it's really good. If you're trying to follow the comics, this is a fucking godsend. This page is a fucking godsend. I would not have followed the current run from 2015 onwards. I would not have been able to follow it were it not for this page basically being a reading guide for me. To be like, here's everything in chronology, because they keep weaving in and out of each other. Although, that's my recommendation.
That's awesome.
So shout out to Wikipedia, and particularly just Google timeline of canon media or timeline of legends media. It'll take you right to the page.
Love that.
Anyway, that was completely unrelated.
I was gonna say, but it was a Star Wars tangent, so
it was a
counts.
Star Wars tangent,
It
so
counts.
Bradley's gonna leave it in the episode.
Sure.
I have a coworker that is rewatching the movies, like just for fun.
Sure.
He keeps coming into work and being like, "So I have a question." And usually I know the answer, but the other day he walked in and he was like, "So I have a question. Who's Anakin's father?" And I went,
Whoops.
"Sit down at the conference table. We're gonna have a discussion. We're gonna have a discussion about Legends versus Canon. We're gonna talk about Darth Plagueis, and we're gonna talk about Darth Vader number 25. By the time you're done with this, you will be able to answer this question." And the answer is fucking nobody. We move on.
No one knows.
Speaking of moving on, Balin and Morgan have their scene. Balin says the word experience, and in my notes I just have, "Bitch, what experience? I want to know. I need to know what this man's backstory is." So
Why?
badly.
Yeah, that okay, see, this is why I don't like when you introduce a lot of like new characters and they're really compelling, because then it's like, well, shit, you didn't have enough time to give us their backstory. And it's like, I need it and I want it badly. Like, where the hell is it?
I know you're either going to do it in the show later,
Right.
or there's going to be a tie-in novel or something, but like it doesn't exist now.
Yeah, I'm like wondering if it would be smarter to do it like as part of the second season, like structure would be to like keep going back to maybe Balin flashbacks, and maybe that's how they keep him, alive in the show is like he's younger, and then like that's like the relevancy.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, and then maybe that's like, oh, his whole motivation is like the whole reason for the second season. Like, what is his motivations and shit? Like, I feel like that might help, but who knows?
See, I thought if you were going to write him out of the show, and I've said in previous episodes I don't think you should. I do like the idea of Ahsoka and Sabine kind of racing Shin to follow his trail.
Right.
I think that'd be really interesting. Yeah. They're both kind of competing to follow Balin, but I don't know. I guess we'll get more details as time progresses. They haven't even entered pre-production for the second season yet, so. But I need this man's backstory ASAP.
Section 2. While Huyang is fixing the ship, he is attacked by an HK droid and alerts Ahsoka and Sabine for help. They come outside in the ship and join the fight against the intruders. After they are successful, Ahsoka instructs Huyang to prioritize repairs to the transmitter and to contact Hera. Meanwhile, on Home 1, Hera decides to help Ahsoka against orders, giving Jason an important lesson in military rules. As she departs on the Ghost, she is joined by Carson Teva and a squad of X-Wing starfighters, and they jump to hyperspace at Hera's command.
So Sabine is finally wearing the full Mando gear. She was wearing it when she cut her hair, but we didn't sort of see it in motion at that point. She is wearing it, which is cool. It looks fucking great. Like when she exits the ship and she has it on. When I was able to see it, because it's super dark, but when I watched it in the right lighting, I was able to see it. I was like, oh, that looks great.
I'm really hoping, like, at some point we get Sabine and Bo-Katan and Mando and all that on screen so we can see all the armors next to each other.
She? Where was she in Mando season 3? Why was she not there for the finale? I don't make it make sense. Make it make sense to me why she was. I guess we will get a line later in this episode that explains why she wasn't there. But one thing I do think is interesting about this scene that Ahsoka and Sabine have is that despite the journey that both of these characters have made in coming back together, Ahsoka and Sabine clearly still do not trust each other. Because they're sort of dancing around, and Ahsoka's like, and Sabine's like, They're not really... I'm struggling to find the words. They're clearly feeling each other out, right? They don't trust the other one to make the call that they think they should make, which I think is an interesting dynamic, again, with where this episode will go and then with where the rest of the season will go. Huyang, he can fight apparently, like quite well.
Love that. I mean, well, yeah, because if he knows every single quote unquote training method to train younglings, where he knows all the moves already, so it's kind of like he just has to incorporate that into some kind of self-defense, and then it would be like built-in self-defense program, I guess, for his autonomy. I don't know.
See, it's just new because I'm pretty sure he gets like blown up in Clone Wars. Like, I don't know if he fights anybody in Clone Wars. I don't remember.
I don't recall.
It's been a while since it's been 2 or 3 years since I've watched those episodes. Anyway, they have a fight, they beat the mercenaries. Huyang tells them to stay together. And I just remember seeing edits of this line about staying together over images of Ahsoka and Anakin and Obi-Wan together, and then showing them alone like years later with Obi-Wan on the desert and Vader and Ahsoka by herself. And I'm like... Now
it's going to pop up on my TikTok as like all these
Now it's going to pop up on your TikTok. And it's, yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be emotionally okay with this. I totally promise you will be. That's a lie. You won't be. Anyway, cut to Hera just doing whatever she wants because she's Hera and I support her. And then we get the live action Ghost cockpit.
Finally.
And the live action Ghost.
It's like, it took this long. I was like, 4 episodes.
We have gotten it before. We have gotten live action Ghost twice before this moment.
Right.
It is in Rogue One and it is in The Rise of Skywalker.
I don't count Easter eggs.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? Like,
this is very visually. You have to go looking for it in both of those scenes.
Right.
You have to basically pause to see it in. You have to pause to see it in Rogue One, and I don't even remember where it is in Rise of Skywalker. It's in the Exegol fight, but I don't remember
Right.
exactly
It's randomly
what
in the
shot it's
background.
in. It's randomly in the background along with the shit million other ships that turn up. But
Which
yes,
I would explain that away as it's just the same type of ship. It's not the actual Ghost because I know that
no,
they said
they've
it was.
confirmed it's
I
the
know,
actual Ghost.
but until they cut to Hera in the cockpit, you know what I mean? Like
Well, it
it's
could be
sorry.
Jason. It could be Jason flying the
Again,
ship. We
until you
don't
do
know
that,
who's flying the ship.
it's just a random ship, and you can't convince me otherwise because I didn't see Chopper or
Okay.
anybody else. So
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna let you have this. We get this scene in the cockpit between Hera and Jason where he's like, "How come you don't have to follow the rules?" And she's like, "When you're a general, you get to ignore orders, but until then." And I'm like, "God, their dynamic is so good."
also, that means that she wants him to be a pilot slash general someday, not a Jedi. Wink,
I don't think
wink.
she
Like,
wants him to be like in the military, but I do think she wants him to be a pilot.
well,
I
yeah,
could see that. It's clear that she doesn't want him to be a Jedi, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But like, I can sort of understand that. You know, look at what has happened to the Jedi that she knew. Right?
yeah.
She has
It's not
known
well. Doesn't work out well.
across her life. She has known three: Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger. Well, no, she's known four: Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, Ahsoka Tano, and Luke Skywalker. How many of those people have had happy lives?
Well, let's see. Luke started his school, so
Mhm.
he's doing well right now. And
Right
then I'm just
now,
kidding.
he's doing
Right
well
now,
right now,
well, as far as
right
she
at this
knows,
exact
he has a
moment.
decent lifestyle, right? So maybe I don't know. I'm trying to make up
You're
excuses, but
desperately trying to.
I'm reaching.
Look, I can't blame her for being apprehensive. I
I mean,
cannot blame
yeah.
her at all for being like not super wild about this. But we don't have a lot of time to dwell on the excellent family dynamics and good parenting is happening currently because who shows up, Bradley?
We got a few people showing up in what I guess is Phoenix Squadron.
It is apparently Phoenix Squadron because one of these characters refers to Hera as Phoenix Leader.
Right. So I just have to assume that this is the Phoenix Squadron. Now, whether or not this is an official squadron or he's just saying that because she is Phoenix leader, and then this is not her normal squad, but maybe it's just like a temporary squad. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so we start off with returning, reprising his role as Carson Tiva is Paul Sun Hung Lee. Congratulations. Welcome back, sir. Next up, we have Michael Christian Alexander playing Lieutenant Basie, previously been on Marvel's Runaways and an episode of How to Get Away with Murder.
Oh shit, which one?
I have no idea.
Going to find out.
I never go that far because, I'm not that into the show, but
He is on.
your
Oh,
favorite.
he's on a random episode of season 2.
Next up, we have Dawn Denninger. She's playing Lieutenant Mowat. This time she is a Rhodian now.
Rhodian pilot,
swapping
Rhodian
her,
pilot.
species once in a while. Then next up, we have Chow Namova, who's playing Lieutenant Jensu. This is only her second credit as an actress because she is a stunt performer in all the other episodes of Ahsoka. So there you go. So good for her.
I'm looking to see if I can see who she actually who she's the stunt double for.
It just said stunt double. I don't know if she's.
I found a source. Hold on. I found a source here. I just googled her name and Ahsoka.
Sure.
And the Star Wars Underworld on Twitter came up. And I'm not sure where exactly this may be from Instagram, but it looks like she is Sabine's stunt double.
Oh, okay.
It looks like that's who that is. Is that Sabine's stunt double? According to the Star Wars Underworld, I am not sure. They're usually pretty good about sourcing their stuff. This one they didn't. I think this might be from Instagram. I don't really have time to look into it, but it looks like that's who that probably is. Anyway, who's our final pilot?
Final pilot is Brendan Wayne playing Lieutenant Lander, who has actually showed up before. Previously played in a little show called The Mandalorian. Only he was credited in the first 2 seasons as the stunt double for Pedro Pascal. Now he is credited as The Mandalorian. in the third
Yes,
season.
he's one of the three people alongside Lateef Crowder and Pedro Pascal who brings the character of Din Djarin to life.
Good for him. And now
So
we get to
shout
see
out
his
to all
face.
these
So
pilots. Yes. I I love this is just a thing that the Star Wars shows are doing and I love it. Every time there's a random pilot, it's always like somebody cool.
they always have to give them something to do. Like you always have like if they're like, "Hey, do you want to have a like just a quick role in a Marvel or in a Star Wars thing?" And they're like, "Do you want to be a rebel pilot real quick?
It's
Like just
always
come on
pilots. It's
in."
always a rebel pilot. It's always somebody in the X-wing.
I love
Yeah,
it.
because we got the directors from The Mandalorian, and now we've got these various people from the stunt team and from the crew here doing this. It's awesome. It
I
is
love it.
awesome.
Section 3. Back at the reflex point on Cetos, Morgan activates the map to gather the coordinates she needs. Meanwhile, in the forest, Ahsoka and Sabine confront Shin and Merrick. Pairs split off into separate fights. Sabine and Shin run off to fight while Ahsoka takes on Merrick. She slices him across the chest and he appears to burst into green smoke, his body disintegrating. Ahsoka runs off to get the map.
I love the exploration of Morgan Elspeth's blind faith versus Balin Skull's blind rationalism.
Yes.
I love this. I love their interactions.
It's almost weird too because like Morgan is blind faith in like a religious sense in this like almost like a like because Night Sister magic and stuff like that is in itself its own religion, and you know the Jedi is in itself its own religion. So it's interesting that they're both like they both have like this viewpoint of quote unquote the Force and like what like everything is supposed to be, and it's just interesting that she thinks of things one way and he's just very much like cautious. I don't think it's gonna work.
He's the skeptic, and it's
Yeah.
really interesting given the where he ends, like literally the final shot of the show where he ends up standing, to portray him as the skeptic, as the
Right.
person who's like, I'm not so sure that just tossing ourselves into the mix blindly is going to work. I love this. I love this interaction, and I just love the interplay of these two characters. So if you, like me, keep hearing the term click in a piece of media and are wondering what the fuck that is, it's a kilometer. I
Oh,
googled it.
I was like, wait, what are you talking about? You're like,
They
oh,
talk.
it's
They say
three
that the
clicks away
ship
or
is
whatever. Yeah.
the ship is a few clicks away. I don't know if they said like 10 or 12 or something like that. That's kilometers.
Got it.
Which for our American viewers,
I was gonna say, even in Star Wars, they don't use that.
for our American viewers like me, is 0.62 miles. So about
Sure,
60% of a mile is a
love
kilometer.
that.
So that's how far Ahsoka and Sabine are having to run to get here.
Maybe they're force running.
They're probably they appear to just be regular running,
I
and
know.
also
I'm
Sabine
kidding.
can't
I'm
use
totally
the
kidding.
Force.
I'm joking.
Yet.
But I know I always laugh actually every time I see characters in a show running like that because I always have to think like, are you not tired and exhausted by the time you get to where you need to go, or you have to now fight somebody somewhere else? Like Sabine has to start fighting Shin all of a sudden. It's like, girl, I've just been running this whole time. Like I'm tired. I don't want to
This
fight
is
you.
this is a thing. Like this was particularly a thing. Like if you study military history, this is a major part of military strategy. The idea that moving from point A to point B, you have to time your arrival carefully. You have to time when you get there carefully. You have to time the movement of your army carefully because you will tire your troops out. And
Right.
they'll get there and they'll be exhausted. If you run right into the enemy, then you have to start fighting right there when they attack you. Or you could potentially lose time. You could cede some element of an advantage in getting control of the battlefield, but your troops are going to be much fresher. It's an important tactical calculus for armies in military history. And I have just activated Aaron mode in my brain,
I
didn't
was
I?
gonna say, I was like, is this a history podcast?
It is when Aaron's here. It is when I take over the podcast to let Aaron talk about history to however long, which are some of our better episodes in my opinion, actually. We should totally have her back to do that at some point for something soon. Anyway, I love the little look that Shin gives Sabine when they run into Shin and Merrick in the woods. And Shin gives Sabine this look like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you still here?
She's like, I thought I killed you, bitch. God
I
damn.
thought I fucking killed you. What the fuck?
I just love that it's like Sabine also kind of gives a look of like, so are we gonna like do this now? Because like obviously we're gonna go fight. Like I don't care about the other guy. Like so I just want my revenge.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that immediately happens. Like Sabine fires first because she's Mandalorian. That's what she
Of
does.
course.
She fires first, and she and Shen kind of run off to fight off to one side. And then Ahsoka's over here, like she draws one lightsaber,
Right.
which I love.
Which means she
I
knows it's not that serious. She's like,
She's
all
like,
right.
this is not that serious.
Uh-huh.
I'm not worried about you at all. I took on an Inquisitor with no lightsaber.
That's
And
true.
I was like 17 at the time.
Yeah, now she's a full grown adult and she's
She's
like,
a fully grown adult.
I've done
She's
this
like,
before.
I don't have time. Am I still doing this shit? It's been decades. Am I still doing this shit? I will say one interesting note, and I'd be very curious, Bradley, to get the opinion of your friend who does like, I don't know if he does like the fight coordination, or your friend that's really into on-screen fights.
Right.
On the two fights in this episode. This one and the one between Balin and Ahsoka later on. Because this one, the fight between Shen and Sabine is so haphazard. Like they're slashing at each other, they're making gashes in the trees because they're not able to hit each other properly. Meanwhile, Ahsoka's just here doing these very precise, clean movements. She's just, no movement is wasted from Ahsoka at all. She's completely in control the entire time. She is never out of her depth. And I just think it's interesting to contrast these two fights.
I think with like Ahsoka, it's more of a dance anyway. So she's kind of like, she's very methodical, right? She's dancing essentially with Merrick. She's not like trying, she doesn't have any kind of like connection to him whatsoever other than just some guy. And Sabine, everything's personal. And you can see that in their fight. Like Sabine and Shin clearly have animosity towards each other. They don't like each other. It's revenge. It's all these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the precursor to them kissing on the mouth.
Which is what everybody thinks. Yes.
It's flirting.
It's foreplay.
This is flirting.
Foreplay. No, but I think that like that's why Sabine's fighting is always so interesting to me because it's always very raw. It's always very like emotional. And then of course Ahsoka's is very like, I know what I'm doing. This is just routine. Like we're just here to like get this job done. Which comparing the fights is exactly what happens because
Ahsoka just sort of
Ahsoka does something that makes me very mad.
She pulls her like lightsaber above her head, and then she does the like samurai duel thing of doing the entire fight in her head, immediately knowing where Marok is going to be, and then slashing his chest open, and this black-green smoke comes out, and Marok drops dead on the ground. Now, I did a little bit of Googling.
Okay.
I wanted to see an official source and an unofficial source try to fucking make sense
Of what happened.
of what fucking happens in this scene. So I have an official source, an unofficial source, and my personal theory. According to an official source, because I for a long time thought Marok was a Night Sister construct. He doesn't show up in the show until Morgan shows up. He's never that far away from her.
Right.
I was like, what the fuck is his deal? Is he a Night Sister construct walking around in the body of an Inquisitor? And then I looked at StarWars.com.
Okay. Oh yeah, their explanation of him is interesting too, yeah.
StarWars.com reads, and I quote from the databank entry, once an Inquisitor hunting Jedi for the Empire, the mysterious Marok now works as a mercenary hired by Morgan Elsbeth to carry out dark deeds. End quote. Okay, so he was around then for the Empire. He was there. He's not just birthed out of nowhere right now. According to StarWars.com, he's been around. So then I went to Wikipedia to try to figure out what the fuck happened.
Sure.
All Wikipedia says is, quote, a cloud of dark green mist erupted from the wound, followed by a piercing shriek as Marok's armor fell to the ground, end quote. That's all we get. Then I remembered Tales of the Jedi.
Okay.
And how the Inquisitor that Ahsoka kills in Tales of the Jedi dissolves into smoke.
Interesting.
But then this one's also green because I also know that Night Sister magic can enhance things. Because it's like They do it to Savage Opress, and they do it to Darth Maul to like make Savage more powerful. But also they can do constructs. They can make like constructs. They can reanimate dead things, which is an interesting note. They can reanimate dead things as zombies, although they're not particularly smart. My question is, what the fuck was the point of Marak? Like, all of this aside, all of this speculating aside, narratively, what was the point of this character?
Right.
What did he actually do besides block Ahsoka from fixing the plot too much?
Okay, so here's my explanation.
Okay, you said you had some way
I have a
to
couple different
explain
things.
this. Okay.
So-
Make it make sense, Bradley. Make it
Okay.
make sense to me, because
I'm gonna
right
try.
now, unless Marak is going to be some important revelation or thing in season 2, which I fully admit we don't have the whole story yet.
Sure.
It could
Maybe he shows up
could
then,
be
yeah.
a setup for later. In the context of the narrative that we have in this season, he only seems to exist for the sole purpose of stopping Ahsoka from interfering on Corellia, and then stopping Ahsoka from interfering in this duel between Satine. I just said Satine, Sabine, and Shin. And then when she progresses in the boss fight hierarchy to Balin, now she can just fight Balin. Like, so I'm ready to hear what you think. Make this make sense to me, please.
Okay. So it would make sense to me if the character was just what StarWars.com says, right? He's an Inquisitor who was hired by Morgan, right? As a mercenary. That I can believe that and take that at face value for the first episode where he stops Ahsoka at Corellia.
Second
that would
episode.
second
That was
episode.
episode 2. They were effectively one episode.
You know what I mean? So he shows up and he stops her. He was only hired to stop her right then and there. Great. Love that. That makes sense. I totally understand that he's a hired mercenary. This death scene where he explodes into the green smoke, and then if you watch his arm in the scene, you can see it shrivel up into like nothing. Like it looks like a skeleton almost. Like, so I have to believe that he's a zombie. He is not a person, because
then how can he talk? How does he have the competency to fight like the?
I don't. Here's my thing: is the only reason that would make sense, that he can talk, that he has fighting, whatever, all that stuff, is that he is in fact a body of an actual Inquisitor at some point in time who died, and they just happened to find his body and his lightsaber and his armor perfectly, all that stuff, and then they just reanimated a corpse. That would be the only explanation I have for why he can do all that stuff, because if he was what you said is just a random construct in just a suit of armor, and then it just happens to be an Inquisitor lightsaber, then that makes no sense, because then it's just like he just looks like an Inquisitor, but he's not an Inquisitor. So that whole theory makes no sense. My only theory is that he has to be a dead Inquisitor that they reanimated somehow. We don't know why or where that happened. That's a flashback that we never got, or it was written out, or maybe they had intended to tell us and they just never got to it, or they cut it for time, whatever. I feel like, because the whole theory of like Morgan and Merrick being the werewolf and, you know, Arthurian legend and all that stuff, it's like that all like it connects too much to like not be purposeful. So I don't understand why he would include that unless he had meant to tell us a different story there and they just cut for time because they didn't have their last 2 episodes that they actually needed to finish the season, which I could theorize that is the case. Like, I feel like Dave Filoni doesn't just do stuff for the sake of doing stuff.
No, he doesn't. He's too, and I know I've just spent a lot of time being like, make this make sense to me. Dave Filoni is too good of a writer and too purposeful of a storyteller to set something up like this and have it essentially just be an obstacle for Ahsoka to face. Like,
yeah, I would love, actually. So, you know how we keep floating this idea that Tales of the Jedi season 2 needs to be all Ahsoka characters. It needs to be Sabine and it needs to be Balin as like their kind of 2 things. But
that was an idea we discussed as a potential way to do season 2 of Tales of the Jedi.
I think make it not just 2 characters, make it three characters and maybe give Merrick his own episode and be like, hey, this is how he got to the point of being a fucking zombie for Morgan. Like, that's what it, you know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why he's not just a random dude, dead body. Like, there's gotta be a reason. Like, there's a connection to Morgan there, even though the way she like acknowledged him in the first episode was like she didn't know who he was. So it was kind of like weird. Like she was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And then Balin and because he's kind of like with Balin and Shin for a second, and then she's like, they're like, "Oh, he can go get her or stop her and Corellia," and she's like, "I see that he does." Like, does she not know who he is? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if he's magic that she's done, it doesn't. I don't know. I feel like there's something that was cut that we're not seeing that explains all of this away, and we're just being assholes about it because it was cut for time.
Yeah, I googled what is Marak Star Wars because we have no official source or Wikipedia would have put it in there. And I did find some things. Marak from Star Wars is apparently Imbo's dog. There's also the name of Imbo's dog in the Clone Wars.
Right.
So shout out to Imbo, the only bounty hunter who retires that I'm aware of. Although I haven't finished the current bounty hunters run, so I couldn't tell you how that ends. I can hear all of the bounty hunters fans screaming at me because it just ended. I'm not caught up on the comics, guys. I'm sorry. Marvel removed the ability to purchase them on their proprietary app, and so I had just haven't gone and caught up. I'm gonna do it. So shout out to Embo. The second thing that I found was a Reddit post that says that he is what happens when you eat Taco Bell in a fully enclosed suit.
I mean, I'd like real explanations.
Well, I
Please.
kind of have one because I found an interview for IGN, which I don't care for IGN, but they have this interview with the director of this episode.
Oh, okay.
So he says, I'm paraphrasing here, that the sort of explosion of like energy was a reference to a Kurosawa film, which is Sanjuro. It's a pretty famous scene, actually, of a guy getting defeated in a duel, and then there's this dramatic burst of blood. It's a reference to that. But I'm going to read some of this quote that the director said, and we'll get to who the director of this episode is at the end of the episode. But he says, quote, "So I was like, quote, what is Marak? Is he human? Is he kind of more machine than man, like how Darth Vader used to be described sometime?" End him quoting. And that was kind of what we were going on. I was like, quote, "It would be great if something could burst out of him," end his quote. Like, what would be his version of antifreeze or whatever it is, because it couldn't be blood. So in the final analysis, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but I think the assumption we were going on was, well, he's in this partially mechanical suit, or part of him was mechanical or whatever, so there would be some sort of non-human stuff that's bursting out there at the end. I don't know what it might have been. There was none of that detail. They've been pretty tight-lipped about a lot of those details. They don't like a lot of info going out. He, Dave Filoni, may have known all along and could have said, we'll make it something else in post. But what I remember him saying was, yeah, it's kind of mechanical. He's not entirely human.
I mean,
that's all we know.
Great. So
the guy who directed the episode was told he's not fully human, and then in post they added in this burst of energy.
Right.
And the director doesn't even really know, but the director was like, yeah, we're going off that he's not entirely human. So I'm guessing they were going for like a magically animated thing, or
yeah. I think in the words of you, Dave Filoni, meet me in the Denny's parking lot. I guess that's what you would say, right?
I would absolutely say, Dave Filoni, meet me in the Denny's parking lot. I just want to talk. Ignore the baseball bat.
Did that ever stop me from buying the Black Series and the Funko Pop and the Retro Collection figure? No, I still bought all three of Merrick. So you know what, Disney, you still got your fucking money from me. And Dave, congratulations.
They still got their bag.
That's right. So anyway,
they're gonna get the Legos money from me. So
I was gonna say that was our spiel on Merrick.
That was our discussion.
I knew it was
gonna
happen, but there you go.
We don't know, and maybe my complaints narratively about the character and his role in this show will be addressed by season 2.
Sure.
Again, we didn't know it was going to be a 2-season show. We just knew what we had in front of us, and what we had in front of us, this was how the character seemed to be to me.
Section 4. Morgan heads to her ship while the calculations are finishing up, and has Balin stay behind to protect the map. Ahsoka confronts him and they begin to duel. Ahsoka manages to grab the map and interrupts the calculations, but the orb burns her hand. Shin is able to escape her fight with Sabine and heads to Balin to help, but Ahsoka stops her by using the Force to hurl her against a rock. Sabine arrives and grabs the map. Balin advances on Ahsoka and drives her to the edge of the cliff, causing her to fall off.
I'm so sorry, I have a lot of notes for this section. So the shot where Ahsoka runs up, she's running up and you can see the hinge in like the lower part of the screen and the Eye of Sion in the upper part of the screen, and it's framed in the trees while Ahsoka's standing there to the side. This show is beautiful. This show is mind-blowingly beautiful. And look, I like the visual design of The Mandalorian. I like how it is gritty. I like how there is much more like dirt, much more grime, much more earth tones to The Mandalorian. Like, it's a very grounded show. God, this show is like a fucking painting. Like every shot is like a fucking painting.
And they establish this like kind of theme early on, because it even gives the visual even is very similar to the Ahsoka episode of Mandalorian. It's very like that visual style of like the town was different and like just the shots that they used, everything about it was like in that same vein of this.
That was kind of, if that was like the proof of concept to this show, then that was kind of the melding of the two.
Right.
That we got a little bit of what that was going to look like. Particularly, I'm thinking, too, just like the design of the really rundown town, and then you get into like Morgan's part of it.
Morgan's part, yeah.
Beautiful.
That's what I was thinking.
Garden on this lake, and I'm just like, the visual design of that is so interesting. And then we get into this show, and Dave Filoni can like do whatever he wants, and it's live action, so he can put all this detail into it, and they don't have to worry about like the animation budget. Which is one of the downsides to animation, is that the budget tends to be a big concern. This didn't have that to this degree. One, because they just told Dave Filoni, do whatever the fuck you want, we're going to pay for it. But also, like, because of the nature of how the VFX were done. So it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It is just absolutely jaw-dropping how pretty the show is. I love how Balin's just sort of sitting there and kind of like waiting.
He's waiting for Ahsoka to strike first.
He's just chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because he says to, like, they have a conversation. Balin clearly knows that Anakin is Darth Vader, which, how? How does he know?
Yeah, because only
Bloodline hasn't happened yet. We are years out from the events of Bloodline. How the fuck does Balin know? Like, nobody knows that Vader became Anakin Skywalker.
As far as he should know,
Anakin became Vader.
Anakin's dead. Like, that's, like, since before the Empire.
She doesn't even find out until she's metaphorically in the fucking room with Vader. She has to be next to him, and then she has to go on a whole journey of self-discovery to just reconcile with the fact that she now knows that Anakin and Vader are the same person.
Right.
How the fuck did Balin find out? Did Thrawn tell him?
I guess
because Thrawn knew, but like Thrawn, like did Thrawn let him know? Did Thrawn tell Morgan and Morgan told Balin? What happened here? How did he find out? This is not a problem. This is I am passionate about wanting desperately to have this story.
My only explanation for that is that slightly later in this scene, he kind of does this thing where he reads Sabine's mind for a second, or maybe it's in the next section, but he kind of like closes his eyes and he kind of feels through the Force like her intention, and he's like, oh, like I know everything that you like. I know about Ezra. I know about all this stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, how do you know that? So I feel like that's similar in that I think he can just read people really well. So maybe he just pulls it out of her.
I think the problem with that theory is that one, Ahsoka is going to be better at guarding her thoughts against this sort of thing than Sabine is. She's not going to be that easy to read. And two, if he tried that shit with Darth Vader would remove his brain from his skull.
Okay, a second theory. Here we go. I fixed it. I fixed my theory. That's not
second theory. Let's go.
Morgan told him.
That's what I think happened.
There you go.
I think
Morgan
Thrawn
knows
told Morgan,
because Thrawn knows. Yeah.
Thrawn told Morgan. Morgan told Balin.
Sure. That's the only. That's
my theory at this point. Yeah. But like, we need this guy's backstory.
Yeah, I guess it's
so bad.
But then it's like, when did he tell her? Like, obviously he had to tell her before, like while she was serving under him in the Empire or something.
But he
Because
didn't serve under her in the Empire. Like that's also the thing too. It's kind of implied that he's sort of a recent hire, like he wasn't really around. Because if he'd been
I'm
around in
talking
the
about Thrawn
Empire,
and Morgan,
oh yeah, Thrawn would have had to tell her,
like
well,
before he left.
yeah, before he left. Well, we've now found out that apparently they were very close allies, despite her never having been mentioned up until this point. Which
Which
is
theory
fine.
time,
We
I feel
don't
like she's
know.
going to show up in the new Thrawn trilogy book series.
Almost certainly.
There
Almost
you
certainly the next thing they write about Thrawn is going to be explaining this shit with Morgan.
go. Right.
Balin has an interesting line about how one must destroy in order to create. I love that line, so I'm bringing it up. But I have a bunch of quotes from just Balin directly in my notes here. I do find it interesting that you mentioned him waiting for Ahsoka to make the first move, or to strike.
Right.
She draws her weapon first. When they're having their confrontation, she is the first person to draw her lightsaber. He is the second.
Mm-hmm. And then he literally, like, he looks at her and he's like, ugh, I guess we have to do this. Like,
They have this. Yeah, he does not seem enthused about it.
yeah, he's like, I don't want to
He's
do
not
this.
happy about it. And he's like, oh, this is a tragedy. Because he was mentioning earlier to Morgan, he was like, I really don't want to have to take her out. I really don't have to do this. They have this incredible sequence where they're just reading each other and moving around, and they aren't attacking yet. Just fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Then they fight. Cannot get into the details of the fight.
That was good.
They're so interesting. I like how Ahsoka's stance in the fight, whenever they pause, her stance is more fluid, and Balin's is much more grounded. He's got his feet on the ground. He's got his lightsaber firmly planted next to him. The man is built like a fucking tank.
Right.
The man is stacked. That is a rectangle of muscle. That dude is not moving off the ground for anything short of a hurricane.
Which is why I love when Ahsoka's kind of like jumping around, she pushes her foot off the rock and stuff to like kick him. And so like, there's so many things that she does where it's just like, she's so nimble and like, kind of like clearly she can move more than he can. And I just love it so much. But he has a lot of power, obviously, behind him.
Yes, it's a very power versus finesse fight that we see between the two of them. And in this specific situation, spoilers, Balin's going to win. And in part because, there's other stuff going on that's not just the two of them fighting. It's not like a one-to-one matchup. But it's very interesting to see just how the choreography's done on this show. I just thought it was super funny that when Morgan goes back up to the Eye of Sion, the subtitles, which I watch on my second viewing to take my notes, the subtitles read anxious music playing. And I'm like, damn, that's me walking around, anxious music playing. Same girl. When she is walking up, the spot where Balin and Ahsoka are fighting is referred to as a hinge. This is not just a reference to Stonehenge, as I had previously stated on the show, but a reference to a specific type of earthwork of the Neolithic period, according to regular Wikipedia. Or at least that is what the word hinge means.
Interesting.
So it's typically little of any evidence of occupation in a henge, although they may contain ritual structures such as stone circles, timber circles, or coves. So that's what this is. It's meant to invoke something ancient, and it's meant to invoke this little collection of stones, and probably most people would recognize Stonehenge as being the most famous henge. So Shen and Sabine are fighting, and Sabine tries to force push, and Shen is like, lol, I read the Star Wars rule book. I know how this works.
I actually like how Shin actually reacts to it before, like, because nothing actually happens, but she reacts as if it's going to happen. So she kind of braces herself almost, and you can see her kind of flinch.
Yeah, she has like a split-second moment of like, fuck. Yeah. Oh, wait,
that didn't do anything.
You didn't roll up the Jedi class in your random character generator.
I love it.
Dear, because that's totally how the Force works. I mean, I don't want to bag on that attitude too much in hindsight. I will say this. I don't want to bag too much in hindsight because up until this show, it kind of was established that the only people who could really use the Force were people with the natural talent for it. Right. This is sort of a new development, so I'm not going to show on it too much. But I'm going to say people who are using the whole she can't use the Force because she's not got the high midichlorian count or whatever, specifically to bash Sabine for let's be honest here, sexist reasons, they can fuck off into the sun. That is bullshit. But I will say, up until this show, this was kind of the first time that I can think of that this happened. Like, even Leia is kind of retroactively established to also be strong in the Force.
Right.
By Return of the Jedi.
That's true.
So, but I do find it interesting that Shin's like, LMAO, I read the Star Wars 5e Player's Handbook, and I know how the rule system works, and you can't do that with the subclass that you rolled. Sorry.
Yeah, you're just a Mandalorian. You don't have Force power.
Yeah, you took the Mandalorian class in the MMORPG that we're all playing. You obviously can't use Force powers because that's not what you selected on the character creator screen. Now you can pay us a micropayments fee, and we will let you change your class. I don't think Star Wars: The Old Republic actually lets you do that. I think you have to roll up a completely new character. Baylan has a line to Ahsoka that I want us to put a pin in. So we're going to bring it back up later. Your legacy, like your master's, is one of death and destruction. Just
put a pin in it.
Put a pin in it. It's going to come up later. But also, like, Baylan, where do you get off on that? Because, like, she hasn't done anything that bad.
Yeah, that's why I'm like...
He's making a lot of assumptions about her.
A lot of assumptions, yeah, because he doesn't know anything that she's been doing since she left the Jedi Order. She just walked away. As far as he knows, she just left, and then she was just surviving ever since Order 66. That's really all she's been doing. So
he seems to think that she's been just like totally out for herself and just in survival mode. And I'm like,
right.
Did you miss the part where she joined the rebellion and was a major figure behind the scenes in it?
But also, everybody was doing that. Like, everybody was out for themselves because they had to be. Like, that's literally the plot point of Kenobi, where he's like, you have to look out for, like, yourself. You can't stop and help people because you're going to get figured out.
Right.
Like, that's just
is he going to bash Obi-Wan Kenobi for this?
Right.
Like,
yeah, what was fucking Kenobi doing the whole time?
What was fucking Kenobi doing the whole time?
He's being pretty selfish.
Sitting around on a desert planet.
Exactly.
Babysitting. Like, yeah, it eventually led to Luke Skywalker, but, like, he had no way of doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Baylan, he's just making so many assumptions about her, and I'm like, you clearly did not read any of the Ahsoka dossiers that may or may not have been available, because you would have known she was Fulcrum. Clearly you know things because you knew Anakin was Vader, but whatever. Rather like Shin throwing down a little distraction smoke bomb to run away. I'm gonna run away to my next Baylan quote, which is he also tells her, you know no other way. Which I'm like, again, you're making a lot of assumptions here, buddy. Anyway, R.I.P. to Ahsoka. She's definitely dead.
Definitely dead. The show's not named after her.
Definitely dead.
It's actually Sabine's the main character now forever.
She got killed halfway through. Yep. Ahsoka, rest in peace to Ahsoka Tano.
We never have to talk to her again.
She died as she lived, being disappointed in Sabine Wren.
I love it.
But also kind of not. We'll put a pin in that and we'll come back to it. Because the acting choice that Rosario makes in the scene is very interesting, given a conversation that happens in the finale. But we'll get to it when we get to it.
Section 5. A shocked Sabine shoots at Baylan and threatens to destroy the map. He convinces her that is the only way to save Ezra, so she turns the map over to him. Shin wakes up and tries to force choke the hell out of Sabine, but Baylan stops her. He puts the map back and the calculations resume to completion. Meanwhile, Huyang is contacted by Hera as they arrive to the planet. Baylan destroys the map with his lightsaber so that no one can follow them, and the trio head aboard Morgan's ship. The New Republic group flies into the path of the enemy ship, and it suddenly jumps into hyperspace, destroying 2 of the New Republic X-Wings in the way. The Ghost and Tiva manage to survive.
So it is important when we are looking at Sabine's actions in this scene. The one thing I don't see get brought up a lot is that Sabine thinks Ahsoka is dead.
Dead.
She just watched Ahsoka fucking die.
Right.
She just watched her get yeeted off a fucking cliff. That woman is dead.
Right, because who could survive that?
Nobody survives that. That's not how water works.
I mean, she could have like at least peeked over the side to see if she was still there.
Well,
like,
she can't get close enough. But
No,
also, like, yeah, if Ahsoka had survived, she would have come back up by now.
Right.
Sabine, as far as she knows, is alone on Cetos. She doesn't know Hera's there. She doesn't know Hu Yang's got the transmitter up and working, or Hu Yang is about to get the transmitter up and working because Sabine has not read the script. As far as she knows, she is by herself with no backup. She has absolutely no way to get to Ezra. Her actions in this sequence make sense. For her to do the calculus and say, the only way I'm going to get to Ezra is by giving this thing to Baylan. Now, can you make an argument she should have destroyed it? Yes. But we're not here to make an argument, or at least I'm not here to make an argument for what she should have done. I'm here to analyze the actions of the character that are presented on screen. And based on the actions of the character, the motivations of the character that have been clearly established by the show, again, this is the setup and payoff, clearly established over 4 episodes that she wants to get Ezra back more than anything else. And based on the information the character possesses in universe, yeah, I mean, this is not a strange decision to make. This is it's a foolish decision, but it's not a particularly not understandable one.
And they establish early in the episode, obviously, like when Sabine says, "Can you make the tough call?
Ahsoka says it, but yes,
right." She says, "Can you make the tough call? Can you abandon, Ezra essentially in service of preventing Thrawn from returning?" And she says she can, kind of, but she's like, "No, it won't come to that. Like, we'll be able to solve our problems." And she clearly can't make that decision.
You know what I just realized? So it's really interesting to me in the narrative arc of the show that Ahsoka, a character whose whole thing, as established by the writing in episodes 1 and 2, is that she feels like, to an extent, she abandoned Anakin Skywalker. That she turned and walked away and left him, and he became Darth Vader, asked Sabine to abandon Ezra for the greater good. And Sabine does not do that. Ahsoka's Padawan does not make the choice that Ahsoka herself made. Now, Ahsoka later would refuse to abandon Anakin on Malachor. Like, she would make that call. But it's just interesting to me that Ahsoka is someone who struggles so much with abandonment. Like, both having abandonment issues herself after having been betrayed by the Jedi Order, and also having issues with leaving Anakin behind as something that clearly haunts her to this day, to ask Sabine to make the same call, and then Sabine doesn't. And Ahsoka realizes, even before she goes off the edge, that no, Sabine is not going to give up on Ezra. She is going to do whatever it takes to bring Ezra back. I think that's an interesting narrative choice to have Sabine do that. But it's also interesting because we find out, too, what happened to the Wren family. Yeah, they're all dead.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're all dead. All 3 of them are gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
They all died in the Purge of Mandalore. What the fuck?
Which, it's not really that shocking, but yes, I mean, makes sense.
Well, again, we're finding out details of these things, but yeah, we find out that Sabine's family is dead. Which also explains why she wasn't in The Mandalorian. Why she wanted nothing to do with that.
She's like, I'm not gonna
go back there.
Right.
Which does kind of explain why that happened.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, sure, fine. I'm just mad. Like, I'm mad in a way that I'm invested in the story. But I'm just mad that these characters are dead. Moff Gideon, you did not die painfully enough.
I mean, if they wanted to, though, that they could do some kind of storyline where her brother made it out or something like that. And he's just been
They literally
hiding.
did it in Rebels. Like, they faked out like her mom and her brother died and then they came back.
That's right. Just do it again.
You know what would have been really fun is to have one of her brother be one of the Mandalorians that are like in the, like, living on the planet. You remember the ones that they encounter in like episode 7?
Yeah.
Have her brother be one of those.
They could have totally done that.
They could have totally done that.
Well, and obviously this came after, but like, yes, they theoretically we could retroactively, if there's the season 4, we still don't know all that situationship. If there's a season 4 and then it's just more Bo-Katan stuff on Mandalore, then maybe he shows up and he's looking a little still raggedy, maybe, and like he's like, I survived.
That's the inciting incident of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, is that they're going to be like, Tristan Wren's going to show up. He's going to be like, I'm alive. Also, my sister disappeared. Let's go to this distant galaxy. And then Mandalorian and Grogu have to go find her.
I like it.
I do find it interesting too. Balin's temptation of Sabine Wren is so interesting to me because of how he does it. Because the dark side, you have to remember Yoda's words on Dagobah, where he talks about the dark side being the quicker path, the easier path. And I just said earlier that I understand Sabine's decision. I'm not going to sit here and say that she made the wrong decision based on the information she had. That's not my place. But what I will say is it's definitely the easier decision. It's definitely the faster way to get to where Ezra is. And that's the thing about the allure of the dark side. It buries that temptation in offering you something you want and preying on the fact that it seems to think that it has an idea of what you really want and what you really are. When he sits there and he says, like, you want to find Ezra more than anything else, he's not wrong. He's preying on these ideas that Sabine has inside of her, that these elements of her that already exist, to sort of lure her into giving the map to him. R.I.P. to the map. That's gone. Whoop, whoop. We'll get to the whole how they follow them next episode, but just R.I.P. to the map. I love all of the classic Star Wars fighter shots where they're inside the cockpit. Never fails.
I do love when they do a classic X-Wing shot.
I love it. R.I.P. to the Rodian, specifically.
Yes.
That made me sad because I liked the Rodian. And then finally we get the Jason gets to deliver the I've got a bad feeling line, and Hera's like kind of looks down at him on, oh fuck. I
also don't know if I like this.
That Jason delivers this line?
It's not that I don't like Jason delivering the line. I don't know if it made sense in this bit. Like for a second, like I don't know. I just felt like it was just in the wrong part. Like,
I think it's in relation not to the events that just happened, but to the events that we are about to see in the next few seconds.
No, for sure. I just don't. Yeah, I don't know if it worked. I just don't think it worked. I think they needed to do something else, like with it, or re-edit it or something. I don't know. The timing was wrong or something was off to me. It just didn't seem like it worked for me. But that's a personal.
Well, he delivered the Star Wars line,
the classic line.
We've said the thing. We move on to, that's the end of the episode, right, Bradley? Nothing else happens?
Section 6.
Christ.
Finally, elsewhere, Ahsoka awakens in what appears to be the world between worlds, and a distant but familiar voice greets her by saying, "Hello, Snips." The voice says it did not expect to see her so soon. She turns around and finds herself staring at one Anakin Skywalker.
So the transition between the lapping waves and the world between worlds is some of the coolest fucking shit I've ever seen on my TV screen.
Why aren't all Star Wars transitions like this? It's cool as shit.
It's mind-blowing how the transition.
I loved it.
I've watched it multiple times. I'm like, good God, Dave. So I don't know if this was you. I don't know if this was the director of the episode.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with this.
Whoever came up with this, Emmy. Give them an Emmy for this shot specifically. This is such a cool transition. My next note, which encompasses basically the entirety of the scene, is just what the fuck? We will not receive an answer to this question, so we will move on. Yeah, that's Anakin Skywalker. Bradley, you want to tell us who's playing Anakin goddamn Skywalker?
You know, in a world of let's just take a body double and put Luke Skywalker's face on that body double, we get somebody who actually has already played the role of Anakin Skywalker as playing the role of Anakin Skywalker, and it is the one and the only Hayden Christensen.
Yep, Hayden Christensen's here. I will say, I don't know if it's the lighting in this scene, the way he's underlit, just how it's lit. The first time I watched this scene and I saw de-aged Anakin Skywalker, I was like, oh, that does not look good. Oh, that looks bad.
Oh, really?
That looks real bad. That looks like a fucking video game. What the fuck is that? What am I seeing? Very cool that Anakin is here. So we did get confirmation by the show that Anakin is going to be in it because he's right there. But I was like, that's too smooth. That doesn't look that doesn't even look remotely close. You're telling me that the people who did all the fucking de-aging for Ant-Man are down the hall? You're telling me the people who de-aged Samuel L. Jackson for Captain Marvel are down the hall and you couldn't find them to come out here and de-age Hayden Christensen properly? What the fuck is going on? I don't like this. I'm so apprehensive about next week. I'm so worried about the digital de-aging of next week because I know he's going to turn up. It's just going to look weird. It's going to look awkward. It's not going to look good. I am setting all of this up for next episode.
That's so funny you say that, because the second I saw him, I thought, this looks better than Kenobi.
Well, they didn't even really de-age him at all in Kenobi.
I know. And that's why this looks
they
better.
didn't do it.
I thought this looked excellent.
I maintain the thing with Kenobi is I think they kept him unde-aged just to let Hayden Christensen act.
True.
I still maintain that I think that's why they did that, was they were just like, this may be the only time he ever comes back to Star Wars. Let's just let this man showcase what he can do with Anakin Skywalker. We'll clean him up a little bit, but we're not going to like completely do his face like we're going to do with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I also, the only other problem with Kenobi and comparing it to this is that you have long-haired Anakin versus short-haired Anakin, which is a totally different mindset and movie set. Like, those are two totally different ages that he's playing those characters.
Spoilers, we will get two different Anakins in this actually. Before too long, we will get two different versions of Anakin Skywalker.
But that's just the last thing I'll say, is that, like, obviously long-haired Anakin, like Hayden Christensen can play long-haired Anakin still, I believe, better, because it's closer to what he actually actual ages, versus short hair Anakin, which is supposed to be, in my eyes, him as a teenager. It's not him.
Yeah,
as
he's
a young
he's
adult.
19.
Yeah, so it's
he's
not
19
even close
in Attack of the Clones.
Right.
Yeah, no, I first saw this and I was really quite apprehensive because I didn't think it looked good.
I have the exact opposite reaction, so
yeah,
that's so funny.
I was like, I'm super worried about this. And then, not to spoil next week's episode, turns out all the budget went to that one. Turns out that they were like, oh, no, hold on. We're just going to do like a couple of seconds of him in this one. And I really do think it's the lighting. Every time I look at it, I do think the lighting just makes him look weird. And when you get him in different lighting, it looks fucking amazing. Not to spoil my opinion of the digital de-aging next week, but it looks fucking amazing. Oh my fucking god. The first half of next week's episode, I've got one more note before we go into who directed this episode and who wrote this episode. And that is, I love that they end on the Vader theme.
Yes, I actually happen to have the subtitles on at this point, and
it says Vader's theme plays.
Yeah.
It's very intentional that they end with, they show Anakin, Revenge of the Sith Anakin, and they play the Vader theme. And that is a clue to the events of next week. Now, Bradley, who directed this episode and who wrote this episode?
Well, every episode, like I said before, is written by Dave Filoni.
Surprise, surprise. I'm as shocked as you are.
Directed by Peter Ramsey. He is known for movies such as Rise of the Guardians and Into the Spider-Verse. He has previously directed an episode of The Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 5, The Pirate. And for Just Charles and no one else, he was an illustrator on Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Nice.
So there you go. That's just for you.
Love that for him. Everybody who likes horror, please go watch Last Voyage of the Demeter. That movie rules. And that movie was kind of spun off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's weird. We don't have time to get into that. At some point, I will do the Dracula episode. At some point, this episode will come. There will be a day where we're not doing anything. Bradley's off somewhere. Charles is going to bring out a bunch of his Dracula people to talk about Dracula for 3 hours. One day we'll do this. All right. Well, Bradley, what are your final thoughts for this episode?
Final thoughts. I like this episode. I think the Hera stuff should have been in the previous episode. I think, other than obviously them showing up to the planet and stuff. But I think you could have just taken that little tiny scene where she's like, I'm rebelling. I'm going to be a rebel, and meet up with Carson Teva and stuff. And they could have just shoehorned that in the end of the last episode.
You know what?
So
Yeah,
it felt
just
like it
chop
ended.
that, put it at the end of the last episode. You have a character arc for her in the last episode.
Right.
And it doesn't just randomly end.
It would have felt like
it.
a solid little
Yeah.
blip to the end of
You
that.
change nothing about the plot, just reorder the scenes a little bit differently.
So yeah, that's
and
what
you have a much cleaner. I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, that's my final thought.
My final thoughts on this episode are that it is good. It is a lot more structurally sound than last week. One of the better structural episodes, one of the great acting showcases for these actors. It's also the moment before the plot fucking becomes unhinged and goes off in insane batshit directions. So I really appreciate on rewatch this kind of personal moment between these characters before we're about to double the size of the cast and go absolutely fucking ape shit on this episode. So I like this one a lot. It's beautiful. It's great. This one I really liked. All right, Bradley, we can watch shows that you work on Peacock and Bravo. And right now we are sticking to one and we are plugging Married to Medicine season 10?
Yes, season 10.
Has that finished airing or is that still airing?
No, I think it's still airing. I actually funny enough, I randomly watched an episode of it yesterday because I'm currently watching The Traitors on Peacock, which Phaedra Parks is one of our cast members and she's on The Traitors. And I was randomly watching her on The Traitors and she's fucking killing it. And I was like, I'm going to watch the episode where she does this funeral scene that I remember filming. And I watched the funeral scene and I was like, she's fucking ridiculous. I love this show so much. I was like, I see why people love watching Married to Medicine. And then there you go. So
shout out to Married to Medicine for existing, and Bradley works on it. And if you want to support him, you can go watch that show. As for me, you can also find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice. We are in between sessions, so we are currently releasing bits of a behind the scenes episodes that we recorded with a handful of the cast members. And you can listen to those. They are a lot of fun if you want to listen to why the cat has to be exiled, why he's not ever in the room with me. You can listen to that episode. It will tell you. Or alternatively, you can listen to Guys and Jedi, Hope Mullinex's show that she does with her friend Chris. I was just on that. I recorded an episode with them and with Colton from For Light and Dice and from the Nerdsmith Twitch channel, where we pitch Star Wars books to Hope's Chris. So not Dark Side Diva's Chris, this is Hope's Chris. We pitched Star Wars books. And yes, Bradley, you will be pleased to know that one of the books I pitched was Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade.
I like it.
So you can listen to me on that episode of Guys and Jedi. There's some other stuff I'm doing, but I have to, in recording this episode, to go work on that so that I can be able to announce it in public. And that is it. So we will be back next week for more Ahsoka and no Sabine. I don't think she's in next week's episode.
If she is, it's like a scene. Like it's like a quick. I don't even think so.
At all.
I haven't watched it yet for our next week's notes, so we'll see.
We will be back next week for that one episode of Ahsoka that people have been dying to hear me talk about.
You didn't say run the socials.
I did previously.
Did you?
Run the socials! Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gays. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongays@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at @GoldSquadGays, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at @GoldSquadronGays. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gays YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gays, and we'll see you next week. The cat is fucking screaming. Why is the cat screaming?
I don't know. I randomly heard the cat. I'm like, oh, okay.
He is behind the two locked doors.
Well, it's like,
we shouldn't be hearing him. We'll get through the rest of these, and then I have to go check on him.
Okay.
And see what the fuck is going on.